I don't want to do engineering. I had to do something. I had challenged my dad. I'm challenging myself. I have to prove something.
So, did you have any fears when you started out?
I am insecure. Okay, what should I do next? How do I put back my people? Took up a loan with an interest rate of 13%. So there was zero knowledge about grooming.
Why do you think you were successful? You had not even done your training.
I was bitten by a Labrador. He kept growling. He gave me 3 warnings. The dog reads your body language. It knows what kind of a personality you are. Everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to do something for themselves. And everybody has their ambitions. You need to understand the stuff. You just can't think about yourself. You just can't be selfish. Everybody now are spending lots of money on their pet products. If he's choosing my profession, if he's educated, I would tell him, please go back to work. I would tell him not to do this.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Decoding with Jaslyn. Today I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to the founder of Pause and Care and a really close relative as well, Pratik Bilgali Ashok. From his earliest years, Pratik has had a deep connection with the animal world. And although his career path initially led him to IBM, his passion for animals remained a constant. In a bold move, Pratik decided to follow his true calling, leaving his corporate job to establish Pause and Care in 2015, where he began to truly work his magic on our beloved pets. Today, he is a celebrated groomer whose expertise has been recognized in numerous newspaper articles. He's also been honored as the International Certified Groomer in Singapore and has earned the title of Best Glamorous Groomer in Bangalore for multiple years. So let's uncover Pratik's inspiring journey and gain insights into the world of entrepreneurship, pet grooming, and hear his valuable advice for those dreaming of starting their own venture. Hi, Pratik. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Justin. That was a long introduction.
I mean, you're worthy of it, right? You have done quite a bit, and your journey is. I was telling you when we were chatting itself, right? Even just reading about whatever you have done, I was like so inspired. So I can't wait to like get into the details of how you sort of went through it, right?
Yeah.
So to start with, okay, what realization made you decide to leave your career at IBM and pursue Pause and Care?
To be honest, Justin, I'm not somebody who want to sit in one place and work. The second point would be a little on the wrong side, but work under somebody is the second thing. That was not my cup of tea. I was always like, I didn't want to get authorized by somebody, do this, do that, come on time, do this. But I justified my job in IBM. I was not like that attitude or something. I did well in IBM also, nothing. But yeah, something I wanted to do independently is something that was always in my mind. So I think things fell into place, and thankfully I'm in a better position right now for all the struggles that I've come so far. I'm proud of what I've done these many years.
I think everybody is proud of what you have done, right? Everyone around you, I'm sure. So, like, why Pause and Care? Like, your parents are into coffee estate. If you didn't want to work under anyone, you could have just gone back there, right? Why did you decide to start this particular venture? What was the market gap, or what did you feel like, what triggered you to get into this?
Okay. See, basically, I'm from the hills, and we have been raised with dogs and cows and always been with animals. And dad always has been a pet lover. Uh, any animal he found in the estate, he used to get it home, treat it, and he used to end up keeping it. So until I was matured enough to tell him that we cannot have wild animals in the house. So please let it be in the nature. You can't keep them in the house. And the boarding school that I was in Germans was also they had the dogs, and I was also interacting with pets there. And I always wanted to be
You always wanted to be
a veterinary doctor.
okay.
Okay. So I was focused on that. Okay. I need to do my science. I need to get into veterinary. I need to do this because the only thing in my mind was I want to go back home to my hometown and help all the pets there as being a doctor. Unfortunately, my academics were bad. I didn't make it to those marks what was expected. And fair enough, I was like, okay, veterinary is not going to work for me. That is when my second choice was nothing actually. I didn't have anything in mind. Or dad said, do engineering. I said no. I don't want to do engineering. That was not my cup of tea because I was very bad at maths, to be honest. I didn't want to get into that. Then he said, do BBM. I said, okay, what is BBM? I didn't know. I did BBM 3 years, finished it. Then they said IT job. Then I joined call center, 24/7. And I was supporting swiping card machine. To some US people used to call me, swiping card is not, machine is not working. I used to technically support that. So from BBM to technical support was totally, but I did well there and I worked only for 7 months at 24/7. Then I got an opportunity like, then I joined IBM and again, it was a technical support team only that I was working with. And I'd been there for 5 years, between 2010 to 2015. But in between 2012, one is I lost my mom at the age when in the year 2010-11. That is when I lost mom. Coming back home after all that, there was always in my mind I need to prove myself. I need to do something. IBM was not giving me the boost. What our bonuses or increments were what 2%, 3% at that time, and our salaries were around. I started on IBM with 16,000 rupees per month. So I put what TTC, whatever they say, I forget all that. But that was what I used to earn when I was in 2010. And 2012, I had a pet at home. She was Blush, a Cocker Spaniel. And I used to groom it. I used to take care of it and everything. And that when we all caught up, one of my cousins, his name is Amol. He told me, Padi, why don't you do grooming? You're so much into pets. Okay, veterinary day work. See, grooming is into the market. I said, okay, I'll give it a thought. I said, and I started reading about it. Uh, Initially, I didn't know how to approach people to, okay, I want to groom your pets. Because 2012, people were not aware of grooming pets, to be honest. So there was zero knowledge about grooming. People used to give bath at home. There was nothing called as nail. You just take it to a vet, you do the vaccinations and get it. So that's how it has been in 2012 till 2021. For so many years, people are still getting used to what grooming is. Because when I started grooming, when I used to say I'm a pet stylist, I'm a pet groomer, oh wow, that's a unique profession that you're choosing. Today you go tell grooming, oh, it's every Tom, Dick and Harry is doing it now. So those were the years when I had to really put in efforts to come this far. So that was the biggest challenge on how to gain the trust, how to gain the respect from people for the profession that you are in. I started off with my cousin itself. She said, fair enough, do it. I used to charge her what 200 rupees at those 2012. And there's only 3 dogs I used to groom up. Word of mouth, word of mouth. She put it to somebody. Then that person put me across to somebody. Justin, to be honest, zero marketing. I have not spent money on marketing at all. I have not put on, gone bazaar over Bangalore. Okay, this pause and care. I'm coming, doing this. No, I didn't do anything. And that's how my connection grew. Of mouth. Okay, if you're giving one person the best service, that person is definitely going to refer you to somebody else. 2012 is when I started doing, okay, I'll go home and do visit dog. But I also was my priority because there is no written butter for me. Then this is not working. Then where do I go? So I didn't want to leave my job also. IBM shift was from 4:30 in the evening to 2:30 in the morning. I used to get back home by around 4 o'clock in the morning, up again at 7:30, head to my client's house, groom their dogs, come back, get again power for one between 12:30, 1:30, again quickly have lunch, head back to IBM, which was in Embassy Golf Links. So 2015, I resigned as a manager at IBM. I was helping content writer server and their online support was supporting the servers for an online news chat. And I used to support them and I had a good team of around 45 people. But I had to justify my job. One, it was tiring because my client base was going up in pause and care. A second, my energy level was going down because of lack of sleep. I started doing my research and I found this institute in Singapore that they train people for getting the techniques right in scissoring and 7 lakhs for a 30 days class. Okay. Okay. And relocating to Singapore where your stay is going to be expensive. So I had two choices. One was Thailand, one was Taiwan, and one was Singapore. Taiwan was best, but the problem in Taiwan is they have a communication gap. They don't know English, and I do not know their Taiwan language. So it used to get very difficult. And even on the calls, I used to really struggle to even communicate with them about the fee structure, how to pay. So I said, no, this is not going to be because they do not know English. I do not know their local language. So I went to Singapore. I took help of my friend who lived in Singapore because my stay was expensive. My stay only was it's too expensive in Singapore for a stay, and travel is expensive. So I had to figure out everything, and it was my first international trip outside India. To be honest, outside Bangalore, that was my first trip. So going alone solo, it was all like confused. My friends helped me out. I had to stay in their apartment. I should travel every day by train there, get to the post. I took up a loan with an interest rate of 13% in 2013 because that was how it was for me because I had to do something. I had challenged my dad. I'm challenging myself. I have to prove something. So I had to go for it and do it. Fair enough. I went there, came back. I started blooming. I got good cover, good customers. Number one is only because they trusted my work. So even when people were not at home, they used to leave their keys for me with a watchman or driver or somebody for me to just walk in, get the dogs done, and move out. That is a trust factor that I've earned with every customer till date. None of my customers till date come and stand next to me and see how I work or monitor me or tell me, okay, you're doing this, okay, do this, okay, do that. They just leave their pets with me, trust me completely. I do it for them and I send them off. So this is how the journey has been so far.
Why do you think your customers trusted you so much? And why do you think you were successful even initially when you had not even done your training?
I That is because one is my communication skills with them. Being humble is very important. You just can't go yap around, okay, I'm doing this for you, do this, okay, pay me, go. No. You need to be humble enough to a person. And when you it's not like bucket. They say no, you catch a bucket like how office people talk like bucket iditidane or something like that, where he's a chamcha to the manager, something like that. I don't need to do all that. It is just being very polite and humble, and that people recognize you as a good human being. That is more than enough for a customer to win back a customer. Second comes your work, how you communicate with a dog. Are you being aggressive? Are you hitting the dog? Because I've seen people being very aggressive, be very. Yes, I've been bitten. There is no second thought about it. But I don't believe in sedation because when it comes to grooming, you need to groom these pets at least once in 3 months. And these pets cannot go under the sedations for every 3 months once because it will jeopardize their health a lot. So you cannot afford to go have a pet go through sedation process every once in 3 months. So you need to get them used to grooming. It's not easy because I used to travel to Tony City, I used to travel to Whitefield. I've covered all over Bangalore in those years of mine, 2015 to 2023. I've covered all these areas only commuting with my bike or car and getting grooming.
Understood. That's inspiring and, very motivational to, like, how you sort of manage that. Um, Now, you said that your family, your father was not very supportive of it, but you still decided to take a loan with 13% interest and go ahead with it. How did you mentally, convince yourself? Because there will be two parts running in your head, I'm going to assume, right? One is I take this loan and this doesn't work out enough for me to, sort of be successful. Or maybe, yeah, I'll be very successful. How did you navigate that mentally?
One is dad gave me the confidence that I can repay a loan. Because in 2010, when I met in an accident, in a bike accident, and I crashed my bike and I didn't have insurance in my bike because I was like, why should I pay insurance? Simply wasting money on insurance. And I didn't know about insurance at that age. And yes, I was out of the hospital. Then there was a case on me. Then we had to do a court settlement. And that person asked 3 lakhs. Then we came down to 1 lakh. And I could just call dad and tell him, please send 1 lakh. I had to pay this guy. He said, why should I pay? You got the accident done. So you have to pay up. You make a loan, take your office help. we make a loan and you pay it. I paid 1 lakh for 3 years. Every month, 3,000 rupees, it was 16,000 rupees at Berkshire. So that was my hard time. So that was the confidence that I had in me because I've already cleared a loan and I
Got it. So did you have any fears when you started out? Or what were your biggest fears if you had?
my biggest fear, see, and till date, I'm insecure. There is no doubt about it. I'm not telling I'm confident, I'm going to do well. I am insecure. When I started Pause and Care, I think I was the second or third one in Bangalore. Today, in my area, I have 11 groomers, 11 salons in Sanjay Nagar. So, yes, I am insecure. Okay, what should I do next? How do I put back my people? Somehow I tell myself that, okay, I have given my best so many years. People know my work, they will come back to me. I had not gone reduced my pricing. I have not reduced my quality. I'm sticking to the same procedure that is being followed all these years. And if I'm still doing 150 dogs a month, that means I'm still in a good place. Insecurity is there. Tomorrow, what? I don't groom a dog. I don't get one walk in that day. Then my mind starts working. Okay, I didn't work today. Okay, I have 3 people working for me. How am I going to pay them? I have somebody who's depending on me. I have a house to take care of. So I have dogs to feed. So all this starts coming into your mind. But that security is there for me.
So you just justify it to yourself logically. Okay, worst case, I move back home. Is it that how you navigate your insecurities?
To be honest, yes, because that I tell people, please think twice before you want to get into this profession, is because at least I am blessed with some backup where my ancestral properties are and my father is taking care and I can slowly go. I don't need to have a lavish life to somehow support myself. There is something behind.
And when you started out, right, like what were some of the unexpected challenges that you didn't think it would come in your way when you started out or in your journey?
Challenges, one is depending on my staff. You can't do you can't do this alone. You need a help hand because if you're doing it alone, you can do maximum three pets a day. If you're going to wash the dog, dry the dog, give it a haircut, you can max do three. That is how your energy level is. But when you depend on a staff, that is the biggest challenge for you to manage your staff. That is the biggest challenge I've had. Second thing, the costing of the products have been very high. Everybody now are spending lots of money on their pet products, and most of them are being imported. So your GSTs and everything comes to a very high, and these are all luxury taxes. These are not normal taxes. What we're talking about. In fact, my blades are expensive. Each blade is around 5,000 rupees now. If I don't maintain it, I have to reinvest on one blade. So there are these are the biggest challenges when it comes to the staff management and the costing. The costing is too high for pet products at the moment.
Got it. And how do you sort of bring that balance with that, right? Because you said you do need staff and but managing staff is a challenge. And the same way to get good products, you do need to pay quite a bit. So that obviously then runs down into your customers, right? How do you sort of manage that?
What I do with my staff, most of the people I tell them work in a percentage basis because everybody wants to make money, everybody wants to do something for themselves, and everybody had their ambitions and their thoughts. Okay, this year I want to do this, I need to do this, I need to make money, I need to support my family. Everybody comes with their own backgrounds and baggages. You need to understand the staff. You just can't think about yourself. You just can't be selfish. You need to help them out in every manner. I work with few with percentage basis. I work with few in salary basis itself. My staffs are not less paid, and I don't overwork them because I had been in that stage of life where I started washing dogs, grooming dogs, and I know the energy level what a person can take. I don't push myself. No, we can do 7 to 8. Let's do till 8 p.m. I'm being paying you. No, I don't do that. I'm very good at people management. That's what I've observed in myself. The burden will be on the pet parents paying up for the grooming because uh, if I'm charging 2,000 rupees a grooming, my skills have to be there, my professionalism have to be there. That is taking care of the costing also. There's nothing that can be done about the costing of it.
Understood. So, Pratik, you mentioned that a lot of saloons have come in your area itself, and you have also started training, right? Other people who want to get into the same industry. What motivated you to get into it? Because you're almost actually creating competitors for yourself, right?
For me to get one is my age, my energy level is gone down. And I'm not the person who was in my 20s who's high energy, running around doing everything. My energy levels are going low. I'm not building competitors is because if people, as a brand, yes, Pause and Care is just a name, but people coming to Pause and Care is because Pratik is available. If Pratik is not there, Pause and Care is not there. That is how it's been working, because they don't need the brand. They need the person who's working there, because it's a skill labor and it's the touch that we give the customers. I'm not working as a clothing brand or something where it's a sale for everything. This is not something where you can compare it to any other brands. If Pratik is not available, okay, Pause and Care won't be available. When I started training people, I have to do 10 a day. Won't work. Hospitals are doing 15 dogs a day, which is impossible to do 15 dogs of groom. It's impossible. He must be a robo to do so many dogs a day. You cannot do so many dogs a day. Training is something that I wanted to help people out. People are not trained here. Uh, most of them do not have the skills to hold a scissors or hold a trimmer. They look at YouTube videos or Instagram reels. Okay, it can be done like this, but they do not know the anatomy of a dog. They do not know the temperament of the dog. They do not know the particular breed, what style has to be cut. They do not differentiate between each coat of dogs, what has to be done, how a coat maintenance has to be done. I don't pilot any harm in training people and making them as my competitor. No, I don't take.
And how did you actually, design the curriculum of the training program? Are there like multiple certifications? How did you like come up? You thought about it, okay, let me do training, but then how did you actually, lay out the whole plan for it?
To be honest, to train a professional person to walk out of my place to be professional and to learn everything, he needs at least minimum 3 months. Now, people do not have time for 3 months. Either they'll have to relocate to Bangalore, their expenditure of stay, everything will take place. They have their commitments back home. So I have gone through this in the last 3 years. People do not have the time to come for 3 months or 2 months or even a month. People have asked me for 1 day training. People have asked me, can I just come for a couple of hours and see how you do it, and I can do it. That's not how it works. I can't teach people in a day. Now what I've done is I have done a portion of 10 days program. From here, you'll have to take it forward. That is where I put my hands on it. This is what it is. 10 days, I train you so much, and you take it forward. There's only one certification that is being given. The advanced level of certifications, this is a big subject. Right now, we are just doing basics to the max and advanced level of scissoring work. But if you want to go to the next level, I would tell them, please do it abroad, not in India. There are a lot of places where the techniques are very different from what we as Indians follow. For example, if I am going to invest myself in getting to that level of upgrading my skills to level 5, level 6, and I come back to Bangalore, my charges per dog will be minimum 10,000 rupees. And people are not going to afford that. Right now, 2,000 only, they're like, okay, give me a discount. I'll send them every month, everything. And if I wouldn't charge 10,000 for a pet, it's not going to work.
Understood, Pratik. And when you decided to start the training program, did you have similar doubts and pushbacks internally or externally, like when you started, the grooming service, or were you very comfortable that I think I should be able to do this?
I was very comfortable, to be honest, because 14 years of experience of grooming and the knowledge and confidence and experience that I come with handling around 150 dogs to 200 dogs a month, that was a lot of confidence for me. How to handle a dog, and main thing is how to handle an aggressive dog. And those skills have inbuilt with me. Though I've been bitten, ripped apart, I still sit and work. I don't take a break from it. Um, that confidence was always with me. Yes, I can do this. There was no second thought about it. And so far, it's gone well with me. No second thought.
And how did you get your first training batch?
Uh, I put a social network post on Instagram, and that is when I had 10 people sign up for it, which was a basic workshop that I did for a one day just to, and that was very basic, and people signed up for it. And uh, my last batch, I had a 10 days program. Now, every alternate months, I'm dedicating 10 days of my month's time to training. I'll Last month I had around 6 people. June is next batch what I'm going to.
Okay, so that's how you tested the waters by actually putting out a 1 day workshop to see.
And I don't want to do 10, 15 people in a time. I cannot do that because they have to get the practical knowledge. So I maximize myself to max 5 people. I don't go more than 5 because the people have to even get the practical knowledge. It's not just theory.
Got it. And you said like you have been bitten and things like that, right? How did you sort of navigate that?
To be honest, and everybody will be shocked. The first dog bitten me, I was bitten by was a Labrador. And people think, "Oh, Labrador bit you. How is that possible?" Actually, it was after grooming when we were playing, and I had the wrong. It was holding on to a towel, and I was trying to get it out. And the best way to get out something from a dog's mouth is the towel or the object has to be up and down, not sideways. So when you're doing it sideways, is like aggravating the dog to fetch or hunt. That is the training. And while doing something from the mouth, it's always upside down. That is when the dog releases something from the mouth. And I was doing the pitch, and he got aggravated and he kept growling at me, which I ignored. It was my initial days. I ignored that. He kept growling. He gave me 3 warnings.
So is it because you did not know back then, you were not trained?
I was not trained. I did not have that knowledge. And after that incident, I again took a 15 days uh, training for only behavior study and dogs, and I got it done.
So what was your reaction first when you got bit? And you know, how, like, did you even wonder what am I doing with myself?
So that day was, I was in Whitefield, and it was my cousin's dad's sister's husband's some birthday party, his 60th birthday or 70th birthday is what I remember. And I had to travel back to the Sanjay Nagar from Whitefield, which is around 20-25 kilometers. And after bitten, I saw my head. Okay, I have bruises all over. My forearms are out and my fingers are out. But I looked at the dog. The dog just sat and looked at me in a shock. He had no reaction. He said, "What?" It was in his mind. What did I do? The owners panicked. I just put a towel and I rode back my bike from there, went straight to the hospital. Got my stitches done and went for the party. So any dog that we touch, we human beings touch, the dog reads your body language. It knows what kind of a personality you are. So I go with a lot of confidence while touching a dog. So that is my armor. Dog realizes that whatever jack shit I jump around, he's not going to let me go. So they surrender to me, and I don't have any hassle of working with any dog. So
So when you got bitten, were there moments when you have thought maybe I should not do this?
no, not at all. I had a 7 lakhs loan in my head.
So it was the loan that pushed you in spite of all these. So one of the things I wanted to discuss, Prateek, was also see there are a lot of people who have these passions, different kinds of passion. It could be dog grooming or anything else. And they always contemplate if they should jump into something that they're passionate about, leave a corporate job and do this. What would you say would be like the right time? I think your approach has definitely been very practical. You started off on the side and then sort of once you felt comfortable and then went about it. Is that how you would suggest to everyone, or would you suggest, what would be your approach for people who want to start something? How would you say that they should navigate that?
See, it depends on what they want to do. Like there was a phase where everybody wanted to do photography. I don't know if
Right.
2016, 2000 wildlife photography, nature photography, all that. And now they are in a phase where people are doing wedding shoot. Okay. And photography has always been a hobby for them. It was never going to be a profession for those who started as a wildlife photographer. It was a weekend hobby. I Whatever market you want to do, always think that you have a backup plan. If you want to quit your corporate and do this, if it does not work, you need to be ready to go back as a slaver. Keeping all egos aside is number one, because few people think, okay, I quit this, I don't want to do that, I do something else, this does not work, I will invest there, I will open a restaurant, I will do that. It doesn't work that way. You just can't take nasty decisions overnight and decide on one of your careers. I would tell them simultaneously work on both your professional and your passion. See what is helping you all. See if you can take it forward, and only then take a stand. Before that, please do not jump into conclusions. Okay, he's doing this, I can also do this, and jump into it, because it's not a easy road to play.
Understood, Pratik. I think that's a very practical advice. Even I personally, I mean, I'm not a very big like risk taker, and I also feel that that might be the best approach to test the waters and sort of see, because I feel a lot of, I don't know if it's Instagram and movies, they romanticize the idea of just quitting and just starting and you'll be successful. But if you look at it, startups by default are dead. Out of 10 startups, maybe, or maybe out of 100 startups, one or two succeed. So I think that's really good advice, Pratik, from your side. Now, the other thing is you yourself spoke about insecurity. But like you said, not everyone may have backup plans or may when I say they might have other backup plans, but may not necessarily have a financial asset to fall back upon. What would if a friend comes to you saying that the same way, right? Like suppose someone in your same industry, very insecure, all of that, and they don't have the kind of backup plan. What would you suggest they navigate their situation, in in these kind of moments?
If he's choosing my profession, if he's educated, I would tell him, please go back to work. I would tell him not to do this. See, I'm not against this profession or something, but it takes a toll on your body. What energy I have seen at the age of between 20 and 30, and what energy I had post 35 is way different. You get tired, you're standing the whole day. You had issues with your fingers because you're moving you holding on to scissors the entire day. You have calf muscle issues. You might end up having varicose veins. You might be exposed to a lot of allergy from the pets if you're not taking care of yourself very well. I have seen people struggling with asthma working as a groomer, at people seeing struggling with a lot of health issues when it comes to grooming. So I tell people, for a long term, like after 50, what are you going to do next?
So, especially for this industry, you would say make sure you get in only if you have a backup plan.
After this, okay, you will tell, I'll hire people and run the show. How long can you do it? How long can you depend on labor? Once that labor learns everything, he will eventually move out for his future. Again, you're going to get somebody. Again, you'll have to sit and train people. Again, by the time you get him on board, he moves out for his future. Either he'll open up a new one, or he might to work under somebody for a bigger salary package. Something will come up. So, and I have also been studying what happens in US with a lot of people after 40, 45. They're going down. The energy is going down. They are selling their stuffs. They just want to, they're retiring themselves there. They would have done some investment somewhere.
Understood. Now, Pratik, let's talk finances, right? You spoke about taking a loan. How long did it take for you to, once you started, how long did it take for you to clear your loan?
5 years.
5 years. And when did you start becoming profitable?
Uh, See, this is a profitable business. That's why I have 10 in sons and above. Okay, there is no doubt about it. This is a profitable business, because with pet products and grooming and hospitals also getting into grooming, you can see that, okay, this is a profitable business. Um, but planning that finances profitable is not like uh, you're going to take this money or put it somewhere. I have always invested it on myself. Be it getting married, I got married in my own money. I can proudly say that. I didn't depend on back home or my father is there, he'll get me married. No, that is how you and your finances. It is a profitable business. I'm not telling you, no, this is not a profitable business. It is a profitable business.
Okay. And Pratik, what are some common financial mistakes you feel like entrepreneurs get into? And what would be your advice on managing finances? Because you yourself said it took you 5 years to sort of clear the loan. So what would be your advice for managing finances, and what are the common financial mistakes you see people do?
When you're not seeing money pouring in like that, and suddenly when you have money pouring in, uh, you need to differentiate between need and greed. Okay, what you didn't have, you start trying to acquire everything. Okay, I didn't have a bike, I didn't have a car, I didn't have this, I didn't have this brand clothes, I didn't have this brand watches for a couple of years, and then I started realizing, shit, this is not how my lifestyle is supposed to be. I need to save up. I need to do something for my future. If I'm getting married, I need to support my family. I didn't have anybody to tell me save money, do this. There was nobody because we were all grown in a boarding school.
So if you had to tell your pre-entrepreneurial self one piece of advice now that you have gone to it, what did you think you could have done differently? Or, what you could have advised yourself?
I think when I initially started, well, 2016, 17, people did tell me to open branches and do things. I should have done that. I should have started training people and opening up franchises. That was my thought all these days that, oh shit, I should have done that. I should have franchise. I'm sitting, and after 14 years, I'm still sitting at only one place, one area, not expanded, not done anything. That was always behind. Before going to bed, I think about it. But to be honest, anything goes wrong with each salon in another place, I'll be held responsible. For example, if a tongue is cut or a ear is cut or the eye is cut, if you're hurting the dog, if a dog is fallen from the table, broken its leg, these are the cases what we see in social network lately from all the expanded salons. So I'm very happy that I've only opened one and I'm doing this all throughout myself still. So I had no guilt that I didn't open any franchise. But people still tell me you should have done it, but I can't explain it to them. They don't understand the pros and consequences of it, so I leave it as it is.
So is this abuse very common in saloons?
Yes. Abuse is common right now is because one, see, hard labor. When a person who has energy level to work on 6 pets a day pushes himself to work on double 12, minimum 12 pets a day, what is his body going to take? What is his mind going to take? The frustration comes out. If his 12th dog, for his bad luck, is an aggressive dog or a restless dog who's not listening, who's not cooperating, who's restless,
So generally, you would advise pet parents to be mindful of the number of dogs.
I would tell you, the pet salon owners need to be mindful of how much of workload you're giving your neighbors, rather telling the pet parents to monitor your pets because they trust you and come. It is your responsibility to manage your workload. You cannot have a labor doing so much work and blame him for being abusive. I blame the salons for this because people keep sending me photos of salons and videos what happened in Gurgaon, Delhi, Chow Chow being punched or with some hospitals. People send me those, but I tell them who's accountable to this. The owners have to be accountable to this, not the pet parents. This grooming business is works on patience, lot of patience. You need a lot of patience. You need a lot of skills. Your mind needs to be free. You cannot have your home load coming to your workplace.
I think that makes sense, right? Especially as a mother myself, I can understand. I think the only days I get pissed off at my kid is the day I'm the only one managing, right? When I have no help. Because eventually your energy levels run out and you are like, okay, I can't do this. Right. So I'm sure, right? And pets and dogs, they require a lot of patience, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So you said when you started out, you had like people were not into grooming. What is the shift you saw in the industry?
The shift is because one is they know that this is a profitable business. We have a lot of investors who want to invest their money into the market. So there are a lot of corporate people coming into this place. Um, so the money is flowing in the market.
And what is the shift in the pet parent psyche that you have noticed?
One is they want work done cheaper. Okay, they are not going to, not all. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not all pet parents think that way, but to a certain level of pet parents, if a salon is giving 100 rupees grooming charges, and if somebody is doing a 2,000 rupees for a grooming, they need to check what is the difference between this person doing in 100 rupees and this person doing for 2,000 rupees. They need to do a ground check. If they said that my pet is like my child, then they will definitely think twice. Why is this person charging 100? Why is this person charging 2,000? And there is a person charging 100. That is why I picked up that price of 100 rupees. Okay, which got closed in a couple of months only because they can't sustain that market. When you have 25 people standing outside your salon because you're doing it for 100 rupees, your neighbors won't be with you. They will run away from the behind door because they know that amount of task they are going into. There are people doing it for 500. There are people doing it for 1,000, just shaving dogs and doing. Uh, a person who's owning their own salon will not be doing it for that price is only because he knows the amount of costing and amount of time, amount of skills taken to work on that particular pet. For me, if I pick up a Shih Tzu, I need at least 2.5 hours to work on one, be it bath, weight, everything. If it's a husky, I need minimum 2 hours to work on one pet. If one pet is taking 2 hours, I'll be only end up working maximum 5 dogs in a day. My energy is over there. Whereas people who are doing it for this lower cost are doing one dog in just 30 minutes or 20 minutes. So you know the quality of work and what skills are being used on these.
Yeah, a lot of people run behind cost, but then eventually that actually ends up being extra cost for you in some format, right?
Yeah.
So you should be smart about it, right? I think, Pratik, from what I'm understanding from your journey, a big reason behind your success has been the fact that you had no other way out, right? Mm. Other than to basically, join, the ancestral business that we have. But would you say that now, when you have a kid, would you say that is the best approach? Or, you know, because I have seen this amongst a lot of my friends as well, that anyone who's trying to do something different from the traditional way, by default, our society has first says no, right? It is it is just the default thing, right? So what do you feel like, could have been a do you think that is the best way, right, for the next generation? Or what do you think could have, do you think there could have been a better way to do it? Or do you think that's the best way to do it? Like, would you do the same thing for your kid? Like, do you think, because this is what pushed you, right? So
To like to take up this profession or
anything, right? Anything where they might not be following the sort of standard path, right? It could be dog grooming business, it could be anything else, right? It could be them wanting to become a singer or an actor or anything for that matter, right? Like I said, mostly when these non-traditional businesses are spoken about, the first card generally raised, at least our parental generation, is no. What are you like your parents said, what are you thinking about? Why are you leaving a stable job to do like to clean dogs, right? So how do you think, in terms of the society, for the next generation, people should be handling these things? Or have you even thought about that?
uh, to be honest, education is a must. You can't just tell, okay, zero education, you can do this and go. No, I would tell you education. I would definitely tell my children that, okay, your education is compulsory. Post your education, you're free to do what you want because your education will support you at your later stages of your life when you are not able to continue what you're passionate about, and you're going to lean back on what your education is. But without your education, I would not support my children to get into any kind of a profession of their passion.
I think, that's a very smart way to approach it, right? Like, to make sure that you have something which you can fall back upon if passion doesn't work, because like you rightly said, it may not always work. And basis your experience, what is your what do you think has are the most important traits for any entrepreneur to be successful? You said communication is what got you initially, but now that you have been doing this for 14 years, what do you think, you know, are the key things that make any entrepreneur successful?
Keeping your customers happy is base one. You leave the pet inside, you have to communicate with your customers. You just can't sit inside and wait, okay, the dog is dropped and gone, okay, finish it, send it. No. You need to have the personal touch to survive in this world. I'm not telling you all go an extreme level and give discounts, throw money, or tell them do something. No. Keeping your customers happy for our business has helped me a lot. uh, I give them the personal touch. I give them feedback of how their pet is, what is the skin condition, if the vet is need to be there.
Understood. And now for the market is growing so much. What do you think is the future in terms of the pet industry, right? Because you said now a lot of dogs have health issues and things like that. There's also, like you mentioned, dog abuse, and quality of pets is overall going down, right? What do you think is the future of this industry, considering you have been in the market for so long?
The graph that went up for grooming is only because after Corona,
Okay.
2020. That is because people sitting at home sweeted all puppies whole. I want a dog, went online and bought puppies. This happened between the year 2020 and 2021.
Okay.
The only two industries which made business in this Corona period was a medical human medicine and the veterinary business. It boomed. And we saw the number, I saw the number of sales of vaccinations and puppies flowing into the market. And even in a lockdown, they were delivering puppies. I don't know how they were doing it, but they were doing it. That is when people sat at home. Okay, we don't have anything to do. Let's have a puppy. Now, those dogs are now all 5, 6 years of age. So all the dogs that what I have been grooming are all at the age between 3 years to 8 years. I don't have puppies of 4 months, 5 months walking in regularly. In a month, I might have 2 or 3 puppies, which shows the sales of puppies have gone down. The only ones left are the ones which are of this age group between 3 to 8. That is this before Corona time and after Corona. Not that the future is going to be a dead end for dogs. No, people will buy hat dogs. People will have pets and everything. And our future will be there until and unless you still have the capacity to survive in the market, giving your best, being professionalism, being your skills. If you're just doing it for the heck of doing it, you will not last even for 6. It will be a tata bye-bye. And pet parents are also smart enough to know who's doing a good job, who's not doing a good job, what is working for them. The industry is not going to fall for sure. That is the wrong thing. But the ones who are going to survive are the only ones who have maintained their quality and skill and their professionalism in this industry.
Understood. So you do, but potentially see that there could be a decline in
Yes.
the industry. So you should, be the best in the market if you sort of want to sustain.
Yeah, because the breeding standards had gone down.
Okay.
Because of the Corona, people started buying pups. They breeders have started overbreeding their female dogs. For example, people do not know if a female dog has to litter. It has to litter after the pup is 2 years old, and between every litter, it has to be given a gap of at least 1 year, and the breeding has to stop after the puppy is littered 3 times. So you're hampering everything. That is why we have things like hip dysplasia, arthritis. The quality of the quality of the pup is only gone down. The teething is bad, the face is bad, the body structure, the growth of the dog is not there. It is just like how the cousins can't get married because the quality of the humans are not going to support each other. It's the same thing with go with dogs.
So people just breed and it sort of comes down. And to start a pet business like a pet grooming, right? Do you need any certification or can anybody start it?
Anybody can do it, but you need to at least have skills to work on a pet.
But there's no agency checking this.
The
So that is something that the pet parents should really be wary about.
Yet there is no veterinary hospitals involved with this.
So basically any person could just put up a pop and say, hey, I am pet groomer and just deal with anybody's pets, huh?
Imagine my Madhumita comes, I'll open a grooming salon and I'll run.
That's so scary, right? It's so scary if you are a pet parent to know that this is a completely unregulated industry and anybody could be doing anything.
Yeah, because they don't. That's why I tell people do not know the anatomy of a dog. They do not know where to hold a dog. What happens when you hold a dog rightly? How much can a dog? You'll suffocate the dog by putting them onto the rings. There are cases where death has happened to dogs hanging from the table. They don't know anything. So
So what do you think are like, okay, if a pet owner is going into a salon, okay, what do you think are the main things they should be checking before like giving their dog over?
firstly, not Google reviews because they're all bot reviews. If I'm going to send 100 of my friends, please give me a Google review for my new business. They will blindly do it because they know Pratik and they'll say, oh, good place, good thing, good thing, good thing. Dhamar, 100 reviews, you are at 5.0. Oh, very good. This is a very good salon. No. You need to do a background check or go to that list and check how old is this place running. Is he being certified? Where is his certification? Where was he certified? Is he capable of handling pets? That is where you get into the details of, is this person really a good
So I think for all pet parents out there, they should definitely check if certified. But even certifications can be sort of
certification only. Certification you but you'll have the signature of the certification. You always go back to him and check, was this person trained under you? At least you can do that check. If you really want to go depth into it, you can always do that. Just putting fancy walls, fancy stickers, lights, fancy tables, and telling, okay, this is a new salon, professionally done. I'm a professional groomer.
and if suppose a saloon has like abused a dog, is there any legal authority that helps or
You can definitely file a complaint with the police and get them arrested. That he's abused my dog. There is no doubt about it. You can definitely do it. And the same thing happened in Mumbai, right? There was a guy who abused a dog, and that viral went to the friend took that video, and after 2 days, because they had a clash, he viral the video, the friend itself. And there were cops at the door, they arrested him. There were a lot of things that happened, and they shut down the hospital also.
so at least there is government help if something goes wrong. But okay, I think that's very interesting insight, I think, especially for pet parents, because you would assume that when someone is opening something, they have some sort of skill set, but it doesn't necessarily have that. And as pet parents, you should do your due diligence to know that the person whom you're handing over your dog to at least has some sort of skills and training to take care of it and is not just decided one day that I'm going to be a pet parent, a pet groomer for that matter. I think that's my biggest takeaway, to be honest, right? I think it's been very interesting to talk to you, Pratik, right? To understand your journey. I think it's time for us to wrap up. Before we wrap up, are there any final words you would like to say to aspiring entrepreneurs or to anyone who's watching?
I would tell people, please get in, follow your passion, but do it at the right way. Do not have shortcuts. Don't take the shortcuts. Okay, I can just do this and start doing this. It's always good to start from base, level it up slow by slowly, get into depth knowledge of what you are doing. I'm sure it will take time, but it will take you to big heights. But if you're going to take the shortcuts, I'm sure this is not going to take you for a long run, because we have social network, we have a lot of people around us. One wrong post about you, if, say, for example, touch it, if uh, if I've abused a dog and if one of my video or my photo or one comment goes on social network, and finished. So the social network is really strong. People just think, okay, just reels you can scroll up, but the social network will support you and also will get you down any way if you're wrong. So I would tell all people, follow your passion, but do it in the right way. Do not take any shortcuts and think wisely before you put your hand.
That's that's actually makes sense. You're right. These days I think people just want to jump up and rise, become a millionaire in here, but that doesn't happen. That hasn't happened for anybody, right? You have to work hard and sort of live out the struggles before you get there. And I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much, Pratik, for coming on this episode. It was really nice chatting with you. I'm not a pet parent, but I know a lot of friends of mine are pet parents, and I'm sure it will be very interesting for anybody who's a pet parent to hear, and I think in general also for anybody to hear your journey, the way you took upon your passion and the way you were very practical but also passionate. I think you managed and you balanced that very well, right? That you were like, okay, I have a loan, I have to clear it, but you were also like, okay, I love these dogs.
I couldn't run away from anything. This was the road hell for me. I had to do it.
But I think it's very like practical, right? Because most people then they just like get into things and they don't know. But I think for you were like, okay, this is what I have to do. I will stick with it and do it. And I think that's it like I said, it's a very practical approach, and I think it can be applied by any entrepreneur to just say, okay, do it on the side, figure out if you have even a market, and then do the bigger expenses. Like you didn't go and do the 7 lakh training right off, right? You were like, okay, let me even see if there is a market. Once you felt that there is a market, then you went and did the course. And I think those are, I think, the smart decisions you made of making sure that you are not like spending all the money in the world to get certified, and then you realize, oh, there's not a single customer. What am I? So I think that's where I felt like your approach has been very practical while still fueled by passion of your love towards animals. So I think that's
Didn't want to do it in Bangalore. ST grooming was not supposed to be done in India because initially nobody was appreciating this, right? So I thought, okay, let me go to the US. I'll go do it there. There, they take the grooming levels were next level, and I tried. My visa got rejected. I said, okay, Chakib, I have to end up doing it.
so God had other plans for you. But Bangalore has given you quite a bit, right? So I know.
I've been blessed with Bangalore with the amount of people I've interacted with. My friends have supported, my customers have supported me. And thankful to everybody who have bought me. So
I think it's been a pleasure to have you, Pratik. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you, Justin.
If you're enjoying Decoding with Jaslyn, please consider subscribing to the channel. It makes a huge difference in helping us to bring you the kind of guests that you would like to see. We would also love to hear your opinions in terms of the topics and content you would be interested. So please drop in your comments to share your feedback. Thank you for giving us your time.